The Amazon, the lungs of our planet. This is the most biodiverse region on Earth. And for the adventurer, few places hold a spot in the imagination like this one. We were no different, so we made a plan. We would drive from Cusco, Peru, into Brazil across the heart of the Amazon basin, cross the Amazon River, and head north into Guyana. This journey would take us nearly 4,000 kilometers to complete, and it wouldn't be without its challenges. Along the way, we would also meet the kind people who have made this region their home. Join us as we tackle our last expedition through the Americas, into the Amazon. This story starts in Cusco, Peru, where after seeing Machu Picchu, we found ourselves sitting in the only campground in Cusco for campers, surrounded by every type of vehicle you could find driving across the world. We realized we had two options: continue our drive down towards Patagonia, or cut inland and head back north across the Amazon. Even after all the places we'd been, the Amazon still seemed intimidating. We watched videos of Brazilian 4x4 convoys trying to conquer the famous red mud. Once we made the decision to go to Brazil, we had to get the paperwork done for Cuenca so we could take her across the border. But while we were at the vet, the truck was broken into and our camera gear was stolen, along with Nikki's laptop and clothes. But while we were getting robbed, things were even worse for those living on the Peru-Brazil border. Near-record flooding had displaced over 24,000 people, and the region looked impassable. Ignoring the bad omens, we met a South African traveler who had a used camera to sell, and after some last preparations, started heading east. We wouldn't need to drive all the way to Brazil to get to the start of the Amazon. We only had to cross the Andes one last time. With an area covering 5.5 million square kilometers, the Amazon rainforest spans across 8 countries, including eastern Peru. To cross the Andes, we drove up to an elevation of 15,500 feet, passing the Nevado of Sangate before starting our descent towards the town of Puerto Laguya. This 152-kilometer section of road would descend over 4 vertical kilometers, causing a near-instant change in the surrounding topography and climate. That night, we found a quiet camp spot next to a river where we could enjoy our last views of the mountains before heading further into the jungle.
Yeah!
Woo!
In the morning, after packing up, we crossed into the Peruvian state, Madre de Dios, meaning Mother of God. This beautiful region has a dark history, though it's not exactly history, as the issues are ongoing right now. World Bank estimates that in 2012, over 80% of lumber in this region was exported illegally. And it seems the only people fighting the exploitation of this region is the local indigenous groups. However, in September 2014, 4 indigenous leaders were assassinated, despite having previously reported multiple death threats. This included Edwin Chota, an environmental activist seeking government protection against illegal loggers. We were making our way into Puerto Maldonado, the capital city of Madre de Dios and the gateway to the southern Amazon jungle. The city is a popular spot for those looking to experience a taste of what the Amazon has to offer. For us, this meant lots of lodges in the off-season. We drove around through incredible jungle roads, looking for one that would let us in with our puppy. Eventually, as the sun was setting, we found a nice spot. The mosquitoes, heat, and humidity left no doubt where we were.
Are you warm?
I'm not used to this.
You dripping?
From Puerto Maldonado, we would be heading north towards Inapari, the only land border crossing between Peru and Brazil. We still weren't sure if the flooding had subsided, but were excited to potentially be heading into the 5th biggest country in the world. All we had left to do was leave Puerto Maldonado and drive 3 hours to the border, when suddenly, bam. We had gotten into an accident with a tuk-tuk, or rather a mototaxi in this part of the world. To be honest, it was my fault. While many of the intersections in this region have no signs or lights at all, this one had a stop sign that I failed to see under a tree. Luckily, both us and the mototaxi were going quite slow, so there were no injuries to us or the elderly driver. Within moments, a group of other mototaxi drivers was around us and collectively decided on an amount of cash that would cover the damages. It seemed reasonable enough, considering the damage to the man's vehicle, so I gave him a quick ride to the bank and back, and after a handshake and apology, we were on our way again. We were so relieved no one got hurt that we actually drove away quite happy with how things went.
Did you get one of those muffins too?
Sure. We took our time reaching the border, stopping for the occasional turtle in the road as well as a few tolls. As we drove into Inapari, we were glad to see the water levels had subsided. The border control was still set up in temporary tents, and what looked like some final cleanup was still going on. The sand from the river along the road was the only evidence that just a week ago, the river Acre had risen 58 feet, or nearly 18 meters. We were officially in Brazil. We just had to get ourselves and the truck past border control now. Each country has its own system at the border. In Brazil, the federal police issue your visa, and customs issue the vehicle permit. We had no issues at the border. No one even asked for the paperwork we spent days doing for Cuenca. The friendly guys at the border warned us that for the first few hours on this road, we would encounter some pretty large potholes, and they were right. This would extend our driving time quite a bit, and with this area of Brazil being set aside mostly for farming, finding a place to spend the night wouldn't be so easy. We decided to make our way off the main road, relying on some old overlander posts that marked some possible camping spots along a trail. It was hard to believe we were actually in the Amazon. The jungle here had been pushed back so far it was nearly out of sight, though this trail claimed to lead to a small conservation area. And after turning onto an even smaller road, the Amazon revealed itself once again. These parts of the world are still claimed by old Toyota and Mercedes trucks. After searching for some time, we realized our options would be limited to camping directly on the roadside. And while we've camped at enough roadsides, we were just not willing to this time. So we got back on the main highway and made our way towards the next town. Just as night was approaching, we stumbled across a small, family-owned resort still under construction just outside of Brasileia that would let us camp in our truck. While it was supposed to be the middle of the rainy season, it was completely dry, and the temperature was in the mid-30s. Needless to say, we spent some time in the morning to take advantage of the pool. We had made it to Brasileia, a town that sits both on the border of Bolivia and along the banks of the Rio Acre. The significance of passing through here for us was big, as Brasileia was one of the towns hit the hardest by the floods. It was almost impossible to imagine entire buildings were underwater less than 2 weeks prior. Things were looking good. We had made it past the areas that were most affected. We stocked up and prepared for the next 700 kilometers to Porto Velho. These driving days were long, and the rainy season was finally making an appearance. After another day of endless cattle farms, we once again found a place to spend the night as the sun was setting. With our roof tent setup, it's really outdoor living. In some climates, it's great. In others, you have to stay positive. Why are you cooking with red light?
There's a million mosquitoes.
And they can't see the red light? No way. Fact or fiction? Leave a comment. Speaking of the roof tent, this is how we survived the heat and humidity. We would charge our portable battery bank while driving, and then run 3 USB fans in the tent, one for each of us. We found ourselves camping once again near the road, this time in one of the many spots that have been cut down for lumber. Sitting here, I couldn't help but think of Werner Herzog's words in the film Burden of Dreams. The trees here are in misery.
And the birds are in misery. I don't think they sing, they just screech in pain.
Those words must have been inspired by the macaws. This was our first run-in with them, but soon we'd be familiar with their cries and bright colors. Daytime temperatures made it impossible to sleep in, so we were on the road around 7 a.m. A few hours in, the pavement switched to a rough gravel road.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Something.
Oh, I think it's this, Max.
Luckily, we had only lost a bolt. After all the vibration, our rear radius arm bolt came out. This wasn't a big deal, as long as we could find it. But it seemed we weren't the only ones losing parts on this road. After some time walking around, I had quite the collection of nuts and bolts in my pocket. After quite a while, we found both the bolt and nut, and now I had to get the radius arm lined up with its mount. I ended up using a rock under one tire to push the axle back into place. I have to mention that Brazilians are some of the nicest people we've met during our travels. First, a truck stopped and asked if we need help, then someone gave us some water and snacks, and finally, just as I was going to put the nut on, a driver of a water truck stopped and without even asking, went ahead and did it for us.
Getting light.
After a few hours, we were back on the road again, crossing one of the biggest rivers in South America, the Madeira. We were listening to the audiobook The Lost City of Z while we drove. a sort of culmination of stories of all the explorers who went to the Amazon looking for the lost city of El Dorado, rumored to be built of gold, or simply trying to uncover the mysteries of the jungle. How they tried to get donkeys and horses through the forest, battled with insects and diseases, and how expeditions thousands strong had disappeared altogether. As we drove on the manicured roads, we looked around and thought, how could anyone have conquered this on foot? As we rolled into Porto Velo, the rain came with us. It rained hard, and some of the streets were flooding.
It's raining.
It's flooded.
Like most cities for us, Porto Velo was just a stop to get some errands done. We stopped at a laundromat and did some grocery shopping before heading to our next spot. By the time our laundry was done, it was sunny again. Shopping in Brazil is really convenient. Huge department stores, like these ones, both for car parts, make up most of the stores. Drinking water is also available for free at most gas stations, though I think you'll find scenes like this only in Brazil. We had made our way to another paid campsite, with a pool. We had been driving all day every day and decided a little break would be good for us. We weren't heading far today, only crossing the Madeira River again to head to a different camp spot. There we would do some maintenance on the truck before heading north to the infamous BR 319, the unpaved highway connecting Porto Velo with Manaus. The maintenance was all fairly standard. I pulled the front hubs apart to repack the bearings with grease and did an oil change as well. The heat always makes easy jobs feel like big ones, but to make matters worse, it seemed like we had parked in fire ant territory. In the morning, our host came by and said to grab the camera because he wanted to show us something. He hooked us up with some small bananas and then showed me some fruits I had never seen before.
Experimenta pra tu ver.
This is atamoya, a sweet and soft fruit you can break open with your hands. I'd later learned that it's actually a cross between two local fruits, sugar apple and cherimoya. I thought it was great, but the texture was not Nikki's favorite.
What the hell?
Yeah, and then just like slurp some out, but don't eat the seeds. It's actually kind of nice, isn't it?
I know.
Next was capuaçu. What looked almost like a coconut had a pretty surprising, almost cotton candy-like texture inside. We had a bit of trouble with the Brazilian Portuguese because while it had some similar words to Spanish, it was completely different. But we eventually understood this fruit is mostly combined with sugar and frozen to make a natural ice cream. We got some for the road to try out. We even got a complimentary bag of limes at this spot.
Some bananas.
It's 8 in the morning or something.
Yeah, it's sweaty out here. Sweaty weather. Sandwiches on deck with a hint of sweat in them.
After getting on the road, we made our way to the Humaita district, where we would top off on some final supplies before turning onto the BR 319. Yes, all of this preparation was essentially for this single road, but why is the BR 319 such a big deal anyways? Well, it's one of the last major roadways in Brazil that have remained unpaved, and that means when it rains, the road essentially turns into a bog. Built by the military in the early 70s, this road is still a major point of discussion in Brazil, and even outside of Brazil. Conservation groups argue that this road being unpaved is the last defense against the deforestation that has taken place in the Amazon in the last 60 years. In fact, before the 70s, there were no roads in the Amazon at all. Access was either by boat or plane. Since the development of major roadways throughout the region, 20% of the rainforest has been lost. Anywhere between 65 to 80% of this deforestation is due to cattle farming, while another large chunk comes from soy production. Brazil is the biggest exporter of beef in the world, with roughly 230 million cattle in the country. In the mid-2000s, Brazil, largely due to international pressure, focused on conservation efforts in the Amazon, and over a decade successfully decreased deforestation rates by nearly 80%. But when in 2019, Jair Bolsonaro stepped in, he immediately began to undo conservation efforts, making it clear he would not recognize any indigenous lands, and instead focus on the commercialization of the Amazon. As a result, deforestation doubled during his term. Of course, Brazil is a country that has had a long battle with poverty and hunger, and beef and soy are crucial to the economy. The issue is that while the exact figures are disputed, well over a third of the deforestation occurring in the Amazon is illegal. Credit should also be given where credit is due. In 2023, Brazil saw Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva elected, and that same year the deforestation rate in the Amazon was decreased by 50%. We had made it to the beginning of the infamous road. 655 kilometers would separate us from Manaus, though only about 400 remained unpaved. After reading lots of blogs and watching many videos, we knew that depending on the conditions, it might take as long as 3 or 4 days to complete this route. It wasn't long until the pavement was replaced by a rough dirt road. To take some stress both off the truck and ourselves, we stopped to air down, letting the tires do the work instead. We also ran into DNIT for the first time, who have been tasked with repairing the road. Finally, we stopped in Realidad to top off our fuel one last time. This would be the last town for a while. We drove about 8 hours that day, constantly waiting for the road to get worse. But even with the dark clouds on the horizon and the occasional drizzle, it never did. We found a spot where we could hide the truck and ourselves behind some bushes and decided to call it a day. course, it was sunny almost the entire day, and it only decided to really start raining when we decided to get out of the truck. But that's how it is.
Ooh.
Nice and shaky.
Cheers.
First day on the 319. What's wrong with you? Oh, that's going in the video.
I got yellow fever.
Boom.
Yay!
Night came and went, and after some coffee and breakfast, we got back in the truck for another day of driving. After another uneventful 5 hours, we came across a rest stop where we could get some lunch.
Wow, that's
Damn, this guy's paying with card.
Card machines. This is something that surprised us about Brazil. While many countries in Latin America still mostly use cash, Brazil has gone the other way. Whether you're in the middle of the Amazon at a rest stop or buying barbecue from a street vendor, they likely take card. Once I saw a guy who was selling windshield wipers out of his backpack in a parking lot pull a card machine out for a customer. It turns out DNIT did such a good job repairing the road that there wouldn't be any challenge to driving the 319 at all. All of our preparation and excitement would ultimately be for a typical South American dirt road. There was a good side to all of this though, because we now found ourselves days ahead of schedule and happened to conveniently stumble on a sort of lodge called the Pousada Remanso de Boto, roughly translating to the backwater of the Boto guest house. Boto in this region is the term for the river dolphins found in the Amazonian rivers. What we initially planned to be another quick overnight stop would actually be the highlight of our time spent in the Amazon. This wasn't the Amazon River, though it was one of its tributaries, and while it was known to have anacondas and black caiman, we got the okay from the locals to swim in it. In the morning, I decided to take an air mattress and go float around. If there's one thing that genuinely makes Nikki uncomfortable, it's dark, murky water. I had just come back and convinced her to go with me when she started screaming that there was something in the water with us.
Holy shit. Holy shit. What the fuck? These things. Oh my god. Wow. There he goes.
The Amazon River dolphin, also known as the pink river dolphin. Definitely an eerie sight to see these creatures silently appear and disappear in the murky water. While they do grow to over 8 feet long and 400 pounds, they're totally harmless to humans. Later that day, the family asked us if we'd like to go on a boat tour on the river. Of course, we gladly accepted. Emerson would be our guide. While it was nice to make way across the calm, open water of the river, the real magic would start when Emerson would turn the boat into the trees, shutting off the engine and switching back to paddling. We switched back to the motor and made our way through a wetland maze, finally arriving at a cabin deep in the jungle. Here we would take a walk through the forest and learn about the uses and names of different plants. Emerson and his family are indigenous to the area, so he has a lot of knowledge of the land here and how to live off of it.
Hey.
Oh. Oh.
Uh-huh. I bet you could make a hat with this, yeah.
Cool.
What did you do again?
You just pull them back. And then now next one.
Isto. Você pôr água
Sim.
para tomar.
Sim.
Se não há água, tamo e desce água. Se extrai o óleo da madeira para fazer shampoo para cabelo.
Shampoo?
Oh.
Sim.
Wow.
Para hidratante dos cabelos.
Just a big footprint.
Tapelos.
It's times like this where we really wish we had a translator, but we were getting the idea. This tree was for water, that one for shampoo, another for medicine. Some plants were good for building, others for eating or making teas. Emerson was a great tour guide, despite the language barrier. He also rents out the cabin here for those who really want to experience the jungle in a raw and immersive way. He also does bow fishing, though we sadly didn't have the time to see it. If you ever end up in the Amazon, this is definitely a worthy place to stop by. We would end up spending almost 3 days here before getting back on the road. When we got back, the river dolphins were making an appearance again. The kids here were jumping in the water with them, and the dolphins seemed totally unbothered, if not enjoying it. Just by the truck, a friendly group of Brazilians produced a cloth bag, and to our surprise, a Brazilian rainbow boa came out of it. This snake is native to the Amazon basin, though I knew it from its popularity as a pet snake in North America. This one, oddly enough, also seemed to be a pet. After a great couple of days, it was time to start moving again. To cross this river, we would have to take a short ferry. The drive from this point would be long and uneventful. After the better part of the day, we found ourselves back on the pavement, airing up again. True to the conservationist theories, as soon as we hit paved roads, the jungle disappeared into the distance once again. We weren't planning to go as far as we did that day, but the options for camping were almost non-existent, and it was raining. Before we knew it, we were on the southern bank of the Amazon River. To cross the river here, we would take a ferry that crosses the junction between the Amazon River and the Rio Negro, spanning a distance of 12 kilometers. Volkswagen bus, better known as the Combi, is a common sight here. Lots of locals over our time in Brazil would come up and tell us stories of their travels throughout Brazil, showing us pictures of their campers. And if it wasn't a 4x4, it was a Combi. As the sun was setting, the ferry arrived. Some guys appear and give you a ticket price based on the rough size of your vehicle, and then you're guided into a spot. We found ourselves in a pretty familiar place. The sun had set and we didn't know where we would be spending the night. The waterway was busy, and it seemed the dolphins were following us. Manaus sits on the north side of the Amazon River. From here you can take a 36-hour ferry to Santarém, or even a week-long ferry to Peru. While the Amazon River is slightly shorter than the Nile River in Africa, it discharges by far the most amount of water of any river on the planet. 230 million liters, or 61 million gallons, are emptied into the Atlantic Ocean every second. The Amazon alone accounts for 20% of all river water discharge on Earth. We had made it to Manaus. It would take us the better part of the night to find a place to stay, eventually heading to the northern outskirts of the city where we could stay in a campground under construction. The family who let us stay there was great, but of course, we wasted no time heading out in the morning to find somewhere else to stay. The challenge with cities isn't just finding somewhere to stay with a dog, but also secure and reasonably priced parking for a vehicle this height. After spending half the day driving through various neighborhoods, we ended up finding a hotel in the very center of the city. We've driven through and stayed in some difficult areas throughout Central and South America over the last year and a half, but something about Manaus was different. It was the raw amount of poverty that made it stand out. The numbers would confirm what we saw. Over 1 in 10 people live in extreme poverty, and a further third of the population is below the poverty line. Before 2023, food security was an issue for over half the population. Fortunately though, the new government managed to cut food insecurity down by 80% in 2023, while simultaneously reducing deforestation and improving the GDP by 2.9%. Suddenly, the difficulty around environmental conservation starts to make more sense. There's just bigger problems to take care of. If millions of people can't afford to eat, then burning down some forest becomes a small issue in comparison. One of our first stops would be to a famous snack bar known for its natural juices, Esquina dos Sucos.
It's nice.
Yeah.
Just further down the street, we would see the most famous building in Manaus, the Amazon Theater. In the late 19th century, Manaus experienced a massive economic boom, the rubber boom. The European Industrial Revolution saw two major inventions that would take hold of the Amazon's resources: Henry Ford's motor car and John Dunlop's rubber tire. At the time, the Amazon was the only place in the world where you could find rubber trees. We joined a tour of the famous opera house. Here, we would learn about its history. As you can imagine, the people benefiting from the rubber boom were mostly Europeans, known better as rubber barons. They wasted no time enslaving the local indigenous populations. Some indigenous populations would decrease by 90%. The accounts from the book, Death in the Devil's Paradise, described the brutality that took place in the region. To say the least, it was a genocide. Of course, this meant the rubber barons were getting rich and needed entertainment. As a result, the opera house was commissioned to be built. The dome was built in Italy, and along with the 36,000 roof tiles and many other materials, was shipped across the Atlantic, up the Amazon River, and assembled here in Manaus. Italian painters decorated the dome and walls. The history here is about as dark as it gets, and this beautiful theater is a monument to the historical exploitation of the Amazon and the genocide that occurred here. By the early 20th century, seeds from the rubber tree were being successfully propagated in Asia, and Manaus suddenly lost its economic power, ultimately falling into extreme poverty. Around the historical center, architecture from the old colonial era is everywhere. We spent a few days walking around the city, going to the local market and enjoying some of the traditional dishes found in the Amazon. Before leaving Manaus, we stopped at a shop. I had felt something let go on the suspension back on the bumpy BR319, and fortunately we had just lost a nut holding the bottom of our front right shock absorber. Our grease gun had also run out, so we made sure to get the U-joints and front knuckles pumped full of grease. Or so we thought. Brazil, despite also having a big issue with stray dogs, has massive pet stores. We got Cuenca some treats and some new toys, and some high quality food as well. After stocking up again, we made our way north out of Manaus, eventually turning east to the Represa da Balbina, a lake formed by the construction of a dam. This is one of the biggest hydroelectric reservoirs in the world, and yet another point of conflict. Because of this, to access the area, we would require to pass through a checkpoint maintained by armed security. Here, with the permission of a local restaurant owner, we would be able to camp directly on the water's edge. It seemed we were under a flight path from macaws here. We would see them flying overhead in pairs from morning to evening. It rained almost every day and every night, but we enjoyed the peace and quiet of being on the water for a few days, nonetheless. Cuenca also had just figured out that she could swim.
No! Hey, baby!
Frankie, you like the swimmer.
Dolphins!
What? Oh, they're coming.
The dolphins also decided to visit us again, this time with a little one. After a few days, it was time to head out again. This region, called Presidente Figueiredo, is called the waterfall capital of the Amazon. However, despite the occasional rain, many of the swimming areas were still closed due to the drought and low water levels. We stopped to check out some of the waterfalls, but didn't spend too much time in this area. There is a famous cave here, though the entrance fee was quite expensive and we couldn't bring Cuenca in anyways. On the bright side, on the way out of the spot, we did run into some monkeys. This is the golden-handed tamarine. At this point, I was feeling a vibration that I was all too familiar with, a bad U-joint in the drive shaft. We were able to find a small local garage that could swap in one of the spare U-joints we carried. To my surprise though, the needle bearings we had told the previous shop in Manaus to grease up were completely dry. Staying in the area, we did find a beautiful little retreat to spend the night before heading towards Guyana. They were also finishing up some construction, so we ended up having this place to ourselves. On the way north, we would pass through the Waimiri-Atroari Reserve, a piece of the Amazon still controlled by the indigenous population here. As a result, it's the only section of paved highway that still resembles the jungle. They also closed the highway overnight to prevent nocturnal animals from being hit by vehicles. Eventually, we would find ourselves crossing the equator once again, this time heading north. Just north of the reserve, the practice of burning down forests to create space for cattle was under full swing, and the sun glowed red through the smoke as we approached Boa Vista. Around here, the Amazon gradually turns into a savanna. The drive from Presidente Figueiredo to Boa Vista took us 2 days. We spent the night tucked into some bushes just off the road. When we got to Boa Vista, we got the paperwork done so Cuenca could enter Guyana, and found a spot to spend the night. As luck would have it, it was Saturday, so getting the required insurance for the truck in Guyana wouldn't be possible. Fortunately, we had found a spot that was just about perfect, a place where people could pay a few dollars to spend the day swimming and let us camp until Monday. It was partially gated, had a little restaurant, and Cuenca even made some friends with the dogs on the property. We never could have guessed everything would go so wrong here, and that our own tragedy in the Amazon was only hours away. So that was just about the last video we took in the area, because that night we heard some noises in the bushes around midnight, and Cuenca started barking to alert us. We were all outside at the picnic table, and Cuenca was 3 feet away. When the sound got closer, we all went quiet, and then suddenly a bunch of tapirs jumped in the water, and things got really loud. Cuenca got scared, and I thought she had run under the truck, which is what she normally does, but about 5 seconds later, the dogs on the property started barking, and when I looked, I realized she had run off, and the dogs had likely scared her. We would spend all night from midnight until around 6 a.m. looking for her, and we couldn't find her. Slept for about an hour, looked all through Sunday. When Monday came around, we made 200 or 300 posters. We had them printed with a cash reward. We thought if someone saw her, it was the most likely way we'd get her back. We left them at every vet, nearly every pet store in Boa Vista, and all the properties in the area where she had gone missing. But it wouldn't be until the third night I was sitting outside waiting in case we heard or saw something, and someone messaged me on WhatsApp saying he had seen one of these posters, both at his home and work, and he thought he had seen Cuenca on the road, run over about half a kilometer away. So I went and looked, and I couldn't see anything with a flashlight in the night, and I thought maybe it was mistaken because it's a pretty fast road. But when we went back in the morning around 6 a.m. to look, we actually ran into the same guy, and it turns out he walks to work. So suddenly the odds that he had been mistaken were a lot lower. We kept looking for another 5 days. We rented kayaks, paddleboards, we walked the river, we spoke to pretty much everyone we could in the area, but we never saw her again. At that point, we were crushed. I mean, Cuenca was the only reason, honestly, we were still traveling. We had run out of money a few times, and we needed to wait 3 months from her second rabies shot. It had been about a month since we got our second rabies shot. We needed to wait 2 more months, and then in Chile, they can do a blood test to see if she has the antibodies for rabies, and that was the requirement to bring her back to Europe. But, of course, once this happened, we didn't have the heart to keep going, so we sold the truck, and we left South America. Of all the things, you prepare for on a trip like this, the truck getting stolen or totaled, whatever, natural disasters, it's just, this was the last thing we expected, and we just really couldn't keep going after. Right now we're planning our next trip, so we intend to keep traveling and making videos, but that's how it ended.
Sound like it.